3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files.
Good to be here.
In our first episode, we spent a lot of time trying to pin down the man. We looked at the timeline, the myths, the social climbing, the constructed identity of Jeffrey Epstein. We looked at the ghost.
And today, we stop looking at the man. Today, we look at the machine.
Because that is what this was, wasn't it? When you strip away the tabloid headlines, the Prince Andrews, the Bill Clintons, the conspiracy theories, what you're left with, legally and financially, is an organization.
Precisely. It was an enterprise.
Yeah.
And like any enterprise, whether it's a hedge fund, a car dealership, or a criminal syndicate, it has operational requirements.
Yeah.
It has revenue streams.
Expense accounts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It has logistics, payroll, human resources, and risk management.
And most importantly for us, it has a paper trail.
Always. You can hide a person, but it is very difficult to hide the infrastructure that supports them.
So, our mission for this episode is to conduct a forensic audit. We are going to answer one single fundamental question. What was the business model? How did this operation actually function on a day-to-day basis?
We're going to look at the flow of capital, the recruitment structure, and the physical infrastructure that allowed this to run for decades.
And I think we should do a quick tone check before we start. We are keeping this clinical.
Yes, the subject matter is disturbing, but our approach has to be forensic. We aren't here to sensationalize. We're here to follow the facts found in the documents.
And there are a lot of documents.
There are. We're drawing heavily today from the government of the United States Virgin Islands versus JP Morgan Chase complaint. We're also looking at the Palm Beach Police Department incident reports from 2005 and 2006, specifically the narratives by Detective Joseph Reckery.
And you flagged a document from 1991 that you believe is critical.
I believe it's the Rosetta Stone of the entire Epstein financial mystery. The power of attorney granted by Leslie Wexner.
Okay, so let's start with the most basic component of any business, the operating currency. If you were auditing a standard asset management firm, what would you expect to see?
You'd see wire transfers. You would see ACH payments. You would see equity positions moving between custodians. You would see a digital footprint.
Right.
High net worth individuals and the people who manage their money, they just do not interact with large amounts of physical cash.
Why not?
Well, for one, it's inefficient. It's dangerous. And frankly, it's suspicious. If you walk into a bank and ask for $50,000 in cash, you're going to trigger a mountain of paperwork.
So wealthy people live on credit.
They live on credit and they settle via wire.
But that is not what we see in the Epstein accounts.
No, that is the primary anomaly. According to the USVI complaint against JP Morgan, the data points regarding physical currency are, well, they're staggering.
How staggering?
Between 2004 and 2013, Jeffrey Epstein withdrew more than $775,000 in physical cash from his JP Morgan accounts.
Just walking out the door with it.
Walking out the door, or having it delivered. The plaintiffs allege that cash usage averaged $200,000 per year.
$200,000 a year? That is a lot of walking around money.
It's an astronomical amount of walking around money. To give you some context, the average American household spends maybe a few $1,000s a year in actual physical cash. Epstein was burning through $200,000.
So the forensic question becomes, why? In a modern digital banking era, why does an asset manager require $200,000 a year in hard currency?
When you audit a legitimate business, seeing cash withdrawals of that magnitude is an immediate red flag. It usually points to one of two things: money laundering or off-the-books illicit activity.
You use cash when you don't want a record.
You use cash when you don't want the recipient to be identified. Legitimate expenses, rent, aviation fuel, catering, legal fees, those are all paid by check or wire. You do that to create a record for tax purposes. You want the deduction.
But Epstein didn't want the record.
Exactly. The hypothesis we're testing today, which is supported by the testimony we'll review later, is that this cash was the operational fuel for a sexual pyramid scheme. This wasn't pocket money. This was payroll.
It paid the victims.
It paid the victims. It paid the recruiters. And it maintained a layer of anonymity that digital banking simply would not provide.
But to spend $200,000 a year in cash, you need to have the money in the first place. And not just the cash, but the money for the houses, the planes, the lawyers. You can't withdraw that kind of capital if you don't have a massive reservoir to draw from.
And this brings us to the source.
We've heard the stories about Epstein being a financial wizard, a master trader. Does the evidence support that?
The evidence suggests that his wizardry was actually just access to one specific account.
So we need to talk about the Wexner power of attorney.
This is, in my opinion, the most critical financial document in the entire Epstein archive.
Let's set the scene. It's July 29, 1991.
Correct. Instrument number 1990106490, filed with the Franklin County Recorder in Ohio.
And we have Leslie Wexner, founder of The Limited, Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie & Fitch, a titan of American retail, a billionaire.
And then you have Jeffrey Epstein, a college dropout and a former Bear Stearns employee who left under, let's say, a cloud.
And Wexner signs a power of attorney granting Epstein control over his affairs. Now, I've signed a power of attorney before. It's usually very specific.
Right. That's a standard limited power of attorney. You define the sandbox. You say, you can touch these toys, but not those toys, and only for this week.
But this document, this wasn't a sandbox.
No, this was the entire beach, the ocean, and the mineral rights underneath it. I have reviewed thousands of legal instruments in my career. I have never seen a document quite like this between two unrelated, mentally competent adults.
Let's go through the clauses, because the language here is important. Clause 1.
Clause 1 grants Epstein the power, and I'm quoting here, to grant, transfer, and convey any portion or all of any right, title, interest, or estate I now or may hereafter have, and any real property or personal property.
Any portion or all.
Note the scope. Real property, that's real estate. Personal property, that's cash. Stocks, art, cars, jewelry, anything.
And who can you give it to?
The clause continues. To any person, for such consideration as my said attorney in fact may determine.
Okay, translate consideration for us non-lawyers.
Consideration means price, value. In a normal contract, you give something, you get consideration in return. That's usually market value.
But here, the attorney in fact, Epstein, gets to determine the consideration.
Correct. Which means, legally speaking, according to this document, Epstein had the unilateral authority to take a piece of real estate owned by Wexner, say, a multi-million-dollar townhouse in Manhattan, and transfer the deed to himself.
For how much?
For whatever he determined. $1, a handshake, 0.
That sounds insane. Why would a billionaire's lawyers allow him to sign that?
It effectively merged the identity of Jeffrey Epstein with the assets of Leslie Wexner.
Yep.
It creates a scenario where Epstein isn't just managing the money. For all practical purposes, he is the money.
And it gets broader. Let's look at Clause 2.
Clause 2 gives him the power to ask, demand, sue for, recover, collect, and receive all sums of money. So, full control over collections and accounts receivable. If someone owed Wexner money, Epstein was legally empowered to collect it.
But Clause 6 is where I think we really see the business model of the trafficking operation taking shape.
Clause 6 deals with hiring. Quote, to employ or engage the services of any persons or firms, and to pay for such services out of my assets.
Out of my assets. That's the key phrase.
That is the key. So if Epstein wants to hire a pilot,
paid by Wexner.
if he wants to hire a scheduler or an assistant to manage the massage schedule,
Paid by Wexner.
if he needs to hire a private investigator to follow a victim, or a high-priced lawyer to defend him against police charges.
Paid by Wexner's assets. The forensic implication here is critical. This document provided a legal shield.
Yes. The money fueling the payroll of the Epstein operation wasn't necessarily coming from Epstein's personal accounts. It didn't require him to be a good trader. It didn't require him to make a profit. It was drawn directly from the vast liquidity of the Limited brand's founder.
It creates a separation between the operator and the capital source.
Exactly. It's a proxy war structure. Epstein's the general, but Wexner is the treasury.
And finally, Clause 7.
To borrow money with or without personal liability, Epstein could take out loans in Wexner's name. He could leverage Wexner's credit.
So the conclusion on the source of funds.
This document provided the foundational capital for the entire operation. It explains the mansion in New York. It explains the plane. It explains the ability to withdraw $200,000 a year without blinking.
It's not that he was just a rich guy.
He had the legal keys to a multi-billion-dollar kingdom. This liquidity allowed him to establish the infrastructure we are about to discuss without the typical constraints of cash flow that a normal business or a normal criminal would face.
Okay, so the tank is full of fuel, but you still need an engine to burn it. You need a way to move that money from the Wexner accounts into the real world. You need a bank.
Enter JP Chase.
We're looking at a relationship that spanned from 1998 to 2013.
Yes. And according to the USVI complaint, JP Morgan serviced approximately 55 Epstein-related accounts. These accounts held hundreds of millions of dollars.
But what's relevant to our audit is not the amount of money in the accounts.
It's how the money moved out of them, and more importantly, who was watching it move.
Banks have compliance departments. They have know your customer rules. They are supposed to be the gatekeepers.
They are supposed to be. They're required by law to file suspicious activity reports, or SARs, when they see activity that looks like laundering or criminal enterprise.
And the gates here?
The gates were wide open. The USVI complaint details a timeline of missed, or I should say ignored, red flags that is truly baffling from a compliance standpoint.
Let's step through them. 2006, this is a pivotal year.
In 2006, Epstein is indicted in Palm Beach for soliciting underage prostitutes. This isn't a rumor. It's not gossip. It is a matter of public record. He is charged.
So the bank knows. It's not a secret.
JP Morgan's own corporate security notes this. They classify him as high risk.
High risk usually means enhanced due diligence. It means every transaction is scrutinized.
Theoretically, if you or I were classified as high risk, our accounts would likely be closed. Banks de-risk clients all the time. But they kept Epstein.
Then move forward to 2010. He's already been convicted at this point. He's a registered sex offender.
And risk management discusses new allegations. There are internal emails at the bank. They are seeing reports of child trafficking. They're actively discussing it.
And 2011.
A compliance memo explicitly notes, quote, numerous articles detail various law enforcement agencies investigating Jeffrey Epstein for allegedly participating in child trafficking.
So the bank knew. They had it in writing in their own internal memos. They used the word child trafficking.
They absolutely knew the nature of the allegations. And yet, the relationship continued. To understand why, you have to look at the relationships at the very top of the bank.
Because banks are institutions, but they're run by people.
Exactly. And this brings us to Jess Staley.
Jess Staley. At the time, he was the head of JP Morgan's private bank and later CEO of asset management.
The private bank is a specific division. It caters to the ultra-wealthy. It's high-touch. It is relationship-driven. Staley was the primary interface between the bank and this particular client.
And the evidence cited in the USVI complaint shows a staggering volume of communication.
1,200 emails.
Yeah.
Exchanged between Staley and Epstein between 2008 and 2012.
1,200. That's nearly one a day, every single day for 4 years.
Weekends included. It indicates a relationship that goes far, far beyond banker and client. Staley visited Epstein in the Virgin Islands. More tellingly, Staley visited Epstein while Epstein was incarcerated in Florida.
He visited his client in jail.
Which is, let's just say, highly irregular for a senior bank executive.
And then there's the quote, the profound friendship.
That is the quote from Staley to Epstein. I deeply appreciate our friendship. I have few so profound.
When you have that level of connectivity between the client and the senior executive, what happens to the compliance officers down the chain?
They get overruled. Or they get quiet. If the boss is best friends with the client, you think twice before you flag a withdrawal.
So let's talk about the mechanics of that. We mentioned the cash withdrawals earlier. How were they getting this money out without triggering alarms? Even with a friend at the top, computers track this stuff.
Structuring.
Explain that term.
Under the Bank Secrecy Act, any cash transaction over $10,000 must be reported to the government via a currency transaction report, a CTR. It's automatic. So to avoid this, individuals will structure withdrawals. They'll take out $9,000 or $5,000 multiple times to stay under that radar.
And that's illegal in itself.
It was a felony.
Oh.
And the USVI complaint alleges this pattern was evident in the Epstein accounts.
But they also needed larger amounts. You can't run a $200,000 a year cash operation just on $9,000 withdrawals. It's too slow. They needed a cover story.
And they had one. A cover story that I find particularly audacious. Fuel expenses.
Fuel?
Aviation fuel. This is from paragraph 67 of the USVI complaint. Hyperion Air, Inc., which was Epstein's aviation company, issued over $547,000 in checks payable to cash.
Checks payable to cash, not to Shell Aviation or Signature Flight Support.
Correct. And the stated justification on the books, the memo line was fuel expenses when traveling to foreign countries.
Is that at all plausible?
Forensically, absolutely not. I've audited aviation companies, Aviation fuel for a Boeing 727 or a Gulfstream is purchased via contract, corporate credit card, or an account with a fixed-base operator. You have an account card like an AV card.
You don't pay cash at the pump.
You do not land a 727 in a foreign country and hand a guy a suitcase containing $20,000 in cash to fill up the tank. It violates every safety and accounting protocol in aviation.
It's a theft risk.
It's a massive theft risk. It creates a customs issue. It is a completely transparent cover story.
So if the fuel wasn't fuel?
Then it was just cash. It was a way to withdraw $500,000 from the bank, categorize it as a business expense, and walk away with clean, untraceable paper money.
And where did that money go?
That's the allegation. It converts bank money into the physical currency used to pay the victims.
But not all payments were cash. There were wire transfers, too. The bank records show where the digital money went.
Yes. The complaint lists payments to known recruiters. $1.5 million was paid to entities like MC2 Model Management, $150,000 to a private investigative firm.
And specific payments to victims.
Yes. Jane Doe 1 received over $600,000.
And these payments continued after his 2008 conviction.
They did, which negates any argument that the bank didn't know or that the operation stopped after the first conviction. The financial pipes were still flowing. The machine was still running.
Okay, we have the source of funds, Wexner. We have the banking infrastructure, JP Morgan. Now let's look at the front end of the business, the procurement model. How did they actually acquire the victims?
This is where the business model concept becomes truly disturbing. Because it wasn't just a predator hunting, it was a franchise system.
And the operational front was massages.
We see this clearly in the Palm Beach Police Department incident reports, specifically the case files from Detective Recre.
Why massage? What was the function of that cover?
The massage cover was essential because it provided a veneer of legitimacy. It explained why young women were coming and going from the house at all hours. It explained the presence of massage tables. It provided a plausible denial to the staff.
So if a housekeeper sees a girl, Epstein can say, she's here for therapy.
Exactly. But the victims knew what work meant.
In Recre narrative number 16, a victim states clearly, work means give massages. But the testimony from multiple Jane Does indicates that massage was simply the code word for sexual acts.
Yes. And the payment structure is where the business model really becomes clear. It wasn't just a fee for service. It was a referral system.
A multi-level marketing scheme.
It was an MLM applied to sexual exploitation.
Like Amway or Tupperware.
An identical structure. Let's break down the numbers. The base rate was $200 per session. This was often paid in cash from that stash we just discussed.
Right.
But the genius of the system, the mechanism that allowed it to scale, was the recruitment incentive.
This is from narratives 17 and 18 in the police reports.
A victim testified that she received $200 for each girl she brought. Additionally, the recruiter was given $200 for taking the new girl in for her very first session.
So if I'm a victim, say I'm a 16-year-old girl, I go to the house, I get abused, I get $200.
Right. And $200 is a lot of money for a teenager in 2005.
And then Epstein says, do you have friends?
Exactly. Bring me a friend and I'll give you another $200. You don't even have to do anything. Just bring her to the door.
Yeah, it incentivizes the victims to become recruiters.
It turns the exploited into the exploiters. This is a classic pyramid structure. It ensured a constant supply of new victims without Epstein or Maxwell having to go out and cold recruit themselves every time. The victims did the legwork.
It also does something psychological, doesn't it?
Of course, it compromises them. If you recruit your friend and your friend gets hurt, you feel guilty. You feel complicit. It makes it much harder to go to the police because now you aren't just a victim. You're part of the chain. You took the money.
It locks them in.
It creates a conspiracy of silence.
And who were they recruiting? What were the demographics?
The target demographic was specific. Minors. Vulnerable young women.
And the testimony from the house staff is chilling on this point. These were the people who saw them come in the door.
Juan Alessi, the house manager, testified in Recre Narrative 31 that towards the end, the girls looked young in age, 16 or 17 years of age at the most.
Alfredo Rodriguez, the houseman, was even more specific. Not just how they looked, but how they acted.
Rodriguez testified, and this is a quote, "They ate like his own daughter who was in high school. Tons of cereal and drink milk."
That detail always sticks with me. Cereal and milk. These weren't professional massage therapists in uniforms. They were children snacking in the kitchen before being sent upstairs.
It just destroys the consenting adult defense.
Yeah.
Professional masseuses do not hang out in the kitchen eating Lucky Charms.
How did the recruitment actually happen? What was the script?
Narrative 15 details the approach. They were approached in public places, the Palm Beach Mall, Victoria's Secret, or by peers at school.
And the hook. What was the line?
Hub with your modeling portfolio, or, quick cash to make rent.
The Victoria's Secret tactic seems to have been a favorite.
It was a standardized play. It connects directly back to Wexner. Epstein uses the Victoria's Secret connection as a credential. I work for the owner of Victoria's Secret. It made him seem legitimate.
And the tactic itself.
He, or a recruiter, would provide money for the girl to buy lingerie at the store. He would then ask to see the lingerie back at the house. This transitioned the interaction from modeling discussion to undress, and finally to the massage.
It's a grooming process, compressed into a single afternoon.
Precisely.
Let's move to the physical infrastructure. A business needs a location, a factory floor.
The Palm Beach residence at 358 El Brillo Way.
And this wasn't just a home, it was a facility.
When you look at the search warrant return from October 20, 2005, and the descriptions of the layout, you see a flow designed for volume.
Walk us through that layout.
The kitchen acted as the intake center. This is where the girls waited. It's where they ate the cereal. From the kitchen, the stairs led directly to the master bedroom and the massage area.
So it isolated the work from the rest of the house.
Correct. You didn't have to walk through the living room or the library. It was a direct pipeline. And the tools found during the search warrant execution confirmed the nature of the work.
The police seized evidence.
They found 2 massage tables located in the closet. They found a large white vibrator with a large head, as detailed in Narrative 15. They found adult sex toys called twin torpedoes in a bedroom closet.
And the soap.
Soap made in the shape of a penis and vagina.
These aren't the tools of therapeutic massage.
Not at all. And then there was the surveillance. The police found photos of nude girls on the walls and in drawers. They seized computer equipment and message books. This was a documented environment.
He was collecting leverage.
That's the implication.
Let's talk about the broader logistics network, the aviation.
The so-called Lolita Express, the Boeing 727.
We have the flight logs, which are famous, but we also have the testimony of the pilot, David Rogers, in Requiem Narrative 38.
And Rogers had been employed since 1991, right around the time the Wexner Power of Attorney was signed. He was there from the beginning, and his testimony highlights a massive discrepancy in the record keeping.
What was the discrepancy?
Rogers stated that he listed Epstein and his main assistants, Sarah Kellen, Adriana, on the manifest by name. But regarding the other passengers, he admitted, quote, unless Epstein flew to his island off of St. Thomas, there would be no way of knowing who the passengers were.
Why not?
He claimed he only listed male or female passengers for a head count. Just tick marks. Female, female, male. No names.
For a private jet operation, that is highly irregular.
It's operational security. It's OPSEC. If you don't manifest the names, you don't create a flight record of the victims crossing state lines. And crossing state lines for immoral purposes is a federal crime, the Mann Act. By keeping the names off the manifest, they were trying to eliminate the evidence of federal jurisdiction.
However, Rogers did confirm specific instances.
He did. He confirmed flying to Ohio to pick up a specific victim on several occasions.
And the USVI complaint adds another layer to the aviation.
Highbridge Capital Management. This was a hedge fund acquired by J.P. Morgan. The complaint alleges that the Highbridge jet was also used to transport young women and girls from Florida to New York.
So it wasn't just Epstein's personal planes.
The banking infrastructure's physical assets were allegedly being utilized for trafficking logistics. It shows how deeply intertwined the operation was with the financial world.
This brings us to operational hygiene. You have all these people coming and going. You have massages happening 3 times a day. Someone has to clean up.
The staff, Juan Alessi and Alfredo Rodriguez.
Their interviews with the Palm Beach police are critical because they strip away all the glamour. They dealt with the biological reality of the operation.
Yes. Juan Alessi, the house manager, he testified that Epstein had up to 3 massages a day. His duty was to prepare the house.
And the cleanup.
Alessi admitted he had to wash off a massager vibrator and a long rubber penis, which were in the sink.
In the sink.
It's a grotesque detail, but it's forensically important. It confirms the frequency. And he noted that the bed would almost always have to be made after the massage.
This implies he knew exactly what was happening.
How could he not know? You're washing sex toys in the sink 3 times a day. You see the girls. You see the cash.
Then Alfredo Rodriguez.
Rodriguez was the houseman. He was ordered to remain unseen. Epstein did not want to see or hear the staff, but he saw the girls. He knew they were high school age. He said he felt there was a lot more going on than just massages.
Rodriguez did something very interesting. He kept insurance?
The journal. Narrative 34. Rodriguez kept a journal of the names of visitors and girls. He told police he did it to justify what occurred with the monies he had to keep.
The petty cash.
Exactly. He's being handed cash to give to these girls. He knows it looks suspicious, so he keeps a log to protect himself, to prove he isn't stealing. He's thinking like an accountant in a criminal enterprise.
And he provided evidence to the police.
He provided the journal, and he provided a note on Epstein's own stationery directing a delivery of roses to a girl.
What was the occasion for the roses?
The note directed the roses be sent to a girl after a high school drama performance.
A high school drama performance. That is a direct forensic link connecting Epstein to a minor in a school setting.
It's the smoking gun of the demographic target.
So the operation is running, the money is flowing, the girls are being recruited, the staff is cleaning up, but eventually the law comes knocking. This leads us to the final component of the business model, the defense.
When the police started investigating in 2005, we see the legal defense mechanism kick in. And it wasn't just hiring a lawyer. It was a coordinated strategy to legitimize the illegitimacy.
Attorney Guy Fronston.
Narratives 15 and 24. Fronston contacts the police. He attempts to facilitate interviews. But look at the defense he offers.
The therapeutic defense.
Fronston claims massages are therapeutic and spiritually sound for him. He tries to reframe the sexual acts as a holistic health practice.
And he puts money behind that narrative.
Fronston claims Epstein donated over $100,000 to the Ballet of Florida for massages.
So he's trying to make it look like he's a patron of the arts who just really cares about muscle therapy.
It's a retroactive cover story. Look, I support massage for ballerinas, so having high schoolers in my house is just part of my interest in therapy. It's an attempt to wash the reputation.
But the defense wasn't just soft power. It was hard intimidation.
The private investigators.
Narratives 24 and 42 describe a campaign of harassment.
PIs hired by Roy Black's office, Epstein's high-profile criminal defense attorney, were contacting staff and victims.
What were they doing?
Photographing victims' families, chasing visitors.
It got so bad that the police had to intervene.
Detective Rickery had to warn Fronston because the PIs were portraying themselves as police officers. They were showing up at victims' homes, acting like authority figures, trying to scare them into silence or recantation.
That is obstruction of justice.
It's aggressive witness tampering disguised as defense investigation. It shows that the business model included a security apparatus designed to suppress the inventory, the victims, if they ever try to speak up.
So let's unpack this. We've looked at the money, the bank, the recruitment, the house, the staff, and the lawyers. When you assemble these pieces, what do you see?
You see a complete, self-sustaining business ecosystem.
Funded by unlimited access to Wexner's capital via that power of attorney.
Fueled by untraceable cash, $200,000 a year. Disguised as aviation fuel through J.P. Morgan accounts.
Staffed by a pyramid scheme of victims recruiting other victims. Incentivized by a $200 referral fee.
Facilitated by private aviation that kept no names on the manifests.
And maintained by a house staff that cleaned the tools and kept the secrets, all protected by a legal team that treated witness intimidation as a standard operating procedure.
The documents show a sophisticated enterprise, that this was not a series of random encounters. It was not a bachelor lifestyle. It was a machine.
It had payroll. It had logistics. It had procurement. It had risk management.
And it operated in plain sight.
And I think the final thought for this episode is this. If the bank saw the cash withdrawals, if the pilots saw the passengers, if the house staff saw the high schoolers and the toys.
Why did the machinery run for so long?
That is the question. The machinery was loud, it was visible, and yet it ran for decades.
Next time, we go to the place where the machinery operated far away from the eyes of the Palm Beach police. A place where the rules we just discussed didn't apply at all.
Next time. Little St. James Island. This has been the Epstein Files.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.